All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Shawn Vaughn, and we are back. Welcome to the debut episode of Champions Material, Season 2. For all the current listeners out there and the new ones, as always, we dive into many different topics with different guests. We hope to make you laugh, make you think, and everything in between. Now, everybody who knows me knows that the sport of boxing is in my blood. It always has been, it always will be. And in this episode, we're going to get into boxing in the year 2020. The fighters, my top four fights, a look ahead to 2021, and yes, the entertainment, keyword, entertainment, not boxing match. That was Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. And stay tuned. We're going to have a special announcement at the end of this episode. So for now, let's get rolling. All right, so boxing in 2020. Now, despite everything that was going on, with the pandemic, the election, boxing did give us some good matchups this year. So for different reasons, I'm going to highlight my top four fights of 2020. And again, I just mentioned it a moment ago, entertainment. Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. This fight coming up with Floyd Mayweather and Jake Paul. And what I want to do is break down the difference between boxing, real boxing, and entertainment, which are those fights that I just highlighted. And then Bud. And for those who are not big boxing fans, I'm talking about Terence Bud Crawford, my number one pound for pound fighter in the world right now. And my concern that he's going to be in danger of becoming this generation's Marvin Hagler. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, excuse me. And I'll break down exactly what I mean by that. But let's get started. So like I said before, I'm going to break down my top four fights in the year 2020. Number four, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 2. This was a rematch of a very entertaining fight that took place in 2019. And here's the thing. One thing that, before we even dive into Wilder versus Fury 2, I do want to touch on something that we noticed, whether you're a casual boxing fan or a true boxing diehard guy like me. There was something that you noticed in the first fight, that Tyson Fury was clearly the boxer that was polished, and Deontay Wilder wasn't a fundamental boxer, but man, he could crack. He had power. And as we learned, as we watched Mike Tyson come up back in the day, Teddy Atlas once said, punches aren't made, they're born. Deontay Wilder out of Mississippi, that boy's a puncher, point blank, period. And up to this fight, the first fight I'm talking about, it didn't matter that most of his opponents, even though they weren't even on the level of a Tyson Fury, they weren't going to beat him because that man can get you out of there with one shot. We're not just talking about hitting you with a series of shots over a long fight to eventually get you out of there. We're talking about one time, 10 count, fight over. Deontay Wilder's got that power, and he carried that power into his first fight with Tyson Fury. But the reality of the situation is this, if we're being completely honest, even if you are a Wilder fan, Tyson Fury outboxed him and won at least 8 of those rounds, arguably 9 of those first 12 rounds. But again, what has Deontay Wilder always depended upon? Power. The ability to get you out of there with one shot. And we saw that. And he hit Tyson Fury with a shot that I thought killed Tyson. As soon as he hit the floor the way that he did in that first fight, I remember looking up and talking to my boy. I was like, why are they even bothering with the count? Tyson was laid out. Fury was laid out, done. And at about the 7-second mark, you know what he did? He got up. And it's not about just the fact that he got up, but when the camera turned to Deontay Wilder, you could see in his face, for the first time in his life, anytime he's ever been in a ring, when he hit hit anybody with a shot like that, it was the idea that that person could even get up. That was mental. And see, boxing, we talked about this on the premiere of Champions Material back in season 1, how important the mental game is within this sport that we call boxing. The mental game and the psychological game is just as important as any physical skills that you got. Period. It just is. When Tyson Fury got up from that shot in the 12th round after a very long fight, this was in the 12th round that he did this. Not the first round, not the third round, when you could still say, okay, maybe he was still fresh. This was in the 12th and final round. 12 rounds of boxing, 12 rounds of Wilder cracking this dude. Not as clean as he did when he put him down in the 12th round, but clearly, when a guy like Wilder puts his hands on you, whether you block the shot or not, you're going to feel him all over you. So after 12 rounds of that, he put him down with a picture perfect shot. And Tyson got up. Tyson got up. The look on Wilder's face told me he had never considered what to do in a situation where he cracks anybody with a shot like that and they can still get up. But guess what? It happened. And not only did he get up and survive the round, he didn't survive the round. The reality of the situation is he won the rest of that round. He came back out Wilder because Wilder had nothing left. And that wasn't just the fact that it was in the 12th round. It wasn't just about that. It's about the fact that Deontay Wilder was not mentally, we talked about, again, the mental part of this game, right? We're talking about the mental part of the game. The reality of the situation is this. Wilder was done. He was done. After he put him down on the canvas in that 12th round with that knockdown, he was done in that first fight. And he survived. The guy that put Tyson, so he was the guy that knocked Tyson down, and he ended up being the guy that survived the rest of that round because he was already checked out. And what that did to him mentally carried into this second fight. He already knew he wasn't the superior boxer, and going into the second fight, he knew that Fury could take his best shot. When you are a puncher, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Rumble in the Jungle, I can go on and on with other examples. When you are a puncher and you rely on your power to overcome any deficiencies that you have, whether as a boxer, whether it's your stamina, Sonny Liston, among others, once you hit a guy with your best shot, you expect to get him out of there. And when you are climbing to the top of your division, in this case heavyweight, and you Deontay Wilder, and you putting down everybody that's in your way leading up to that matchup, you expect for them to stay down. And the first time it doesn't happen, the first time that you deal with that level of resistance, it's going to carry over. So in this rematch back in February, I knew what was going to happen before it happened. Now in my heart, I'm going to be real with y'all out there in the audience. I was rooting for Deontay to win that fight. But when people were hitting me up leading to the fight and they was asking me, okay, what do I think is going to happen? How do I think this thing is going to turn out? I had to be real with them. My heart was rooting for Deontay. But the boxer in me, the boxing fan in me, the boxing lifer in me knew Tyson Fury was going to outbox him. And when he came in the ring, he didn't look right. He looked spent. There's a term that a lot of trainers will come up with when they're training fighters for fights, whether it's amateur or pro. And in training camp, it's important to not what we call leave it in the gym. And what do we mean by that? Don't leave it in the gym. You don't want to put so much into your training to get into shape and then to get into regular shape and then get into boxing shape for a fight. You don't want to put so much into that by the time you get to fight time, you've spent too much. You've left it all in the gym. So by the time you get in the ring, you're not right. Your biorhythm is not right. Your body's not right. You don't feel right. Your muscles aren't right. You're not there. And I could see when he was coming into the ring. And certainly that costume, I don't even want to call that a robe, that costume he wore certainly didn't help. But even beyond that, he wasn't right. And Tyson knew it. Tyson Fury came into this rematch knowing that he could take the best punch that Deontay can deliver. They both knew it. So Tyson knew, as long as I don't get caught with nothing crazy multiple times, not just one time, multiple times, I'm going to beat this guy. Period. And that's exactly what he did. He outboxed him just like he did in the first fight. But then he had the confidence. I'm talking about Tyson. He had the confidence to know I could take his best shot. I'm going to back him up. I'm going to see what he does when I make him go backwards. He's always the aggressor, meaning Deontay. So I'm going to see what he does when I back him up. One thing that we've seen throughout boxing history is that very few punchers, guys that make their bones in this sport as punchers, very few of them do well when they are not the aggressor, when they are the counterpuncher, when they're on the defensive, when they're going backwards. And that's what we saw. Deontay was not going to do well going backwards. He did not go well doing backwards. It gave Tyson all the confidence he needed to know that he can do some things with this guy. So he boxed him. And then later on in the fight, he saw how fatigued Deontay was, not just physically, but mentally. Gave him all the confidence he needed to get in there and put him down on the canvas. And it wasn't that he hit him with any kind of shot similar to what he got caught with in the first fight. Excuse me, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. He understood this guy was defeated coming into the ring. This guy was fatigued while in the ring. This guy did not know how to handle being a counterpuncher going backwards in the ring. And it gave Tyson Fury all the confidence he needed to get in there. And he eventually stopped him, not with any one shot, just the cumulative effect of all the other factors that you need to have to your advantage if you're going to be victorious in that ring. Tyson had him, Deontay didn't. Simple as that. Now, Deontay trust me, this is a man. This is a grown ass man out there. So the idea that he can't come back from this, stop it. We're not going that far. But this is one of those moments in your career where you need to understand as a boxer how you want to go about doing this. How do you want to go about doing this? You want to go about this as a boxer? You want to go about this as a fighter? Deontay is a fighter. He made his bones as a fighter. A guy that can get in there, he knew he could crack you and get you out of there. What he didn't do was his due diligence when it comes to understanding the fundamentals of this game. He didn't do that. Just a simple jab, knowing how to set up a jab, knowing how to use a jab to set up your offense, to set up that power shot. Those are things that he just didn't have to do before. He can get away with it because he still has that power. He had and still has that power. So we'll see what he does. Does he use this fight to look in the mirror and say, I've got to become a more well-rounded boxer to go along with my power? Or does he stay what we call stuck on what happened to him in these two fights? Because it's as much psychological as it is physical. So when you're looking at all areas of the game, it wasn't that it was the most entertaining fight. Trust me, the other fights I'm going to highlight are much more entertaining from just a pure viewer standpoint. I'm talking about the psychological standpoint. You saw all the factors that makes a boxer, a fighter, a champion, a champion. One guy had it, the other guy is not quite there yet. But I'm confident that your boy Deontay will get there. And me, I'm pulling for him, no doubt. My number, so Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 2. My number 4 of my top 4 fights in the year 2020. All right, so we're going to transition into number 3. And that's Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia. Now, mind you, I've got Errol Spence as my number 4 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. And this was a fight that just recently took place. Danny Garcia is a well-respected former champion in his own right. We know this boy can get in there. This boy is a great boxer puncher. He is not anybody that you're going to just look over or look ahead to your next fight. Danny Garcia's got respect in the boxing community, period. But Errol Spence is on a whole nother level. Now, this fight was intriguing to me because for all those out there who are already aware, and for those who may not be, Errol Spence had a very, very tragic car accident. And he was really messed up in that accident. And the question was, would he ever be able to box again? A long road to recovery, a lot of rehab. And you know what? Errol Spence got in that ring and looked like Errol Spence. A southpaw assassin is what I call him. Methodical. Never waste any movement, never waste any punches. He goes in with the game plan and he's going to execute his game plan. You will not take him out of his game plan. And if you try to, he's got a counter move. So for as much as I was talking about Deontay Wilder and his moment of recognizing in these two fights with Fury that he needs to add more of a boxer's element, fundamental element to go along with his power, Errol Spence got both. He's always had both. From the moment I became aware of this dude, he has always had both. If you want to know what Errol Spence is all about, look at his fight against Peterson. Look up Spence versus Peterson, and you will see a performance that will add context to everything that you hear me talking about right here. About this ability, about this man's ability to box, to punch, and he could take a punch if he has to. And again, he's going up against a respected champion in his own right, former champion in his own right, Danny Garcia, a guy that just a couple of years ago certainly was popping up in top 10, arguable top 5 pound for pound list. But there's levels to this game. There's levels to this game within boxing. Danny Garcia is on one level, and Errol Spence, post accident, is on another level. Errol Spence methodically dominated him for 7 rounds, and then he wanted to test his stamina, test his legs, test who he is, coming back from that terrible accident I mentioned a few moments ago. And ultimately, he got a decision, almost a unanimous decision. I will give Danny Garcia some rounds there, but a very entertaining, a very but yet tactical fight. And it was a fight that Errol Spence needed to remind himself and to know for sure, live in real time in the ring against a top flight opponent, that he could still be the Errol Spence of old. And he was. Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia. My number three, I should say, in my top 4 fights in 2020. Number 2, Vasily Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. Lomachenko versus Lopez. My number 2 out of 4 top fights in 2020. I was really looking forward to this fight. Lomachenko, footwork, athleticism. I haven't seen that at the highest level of boxing since Roy Jones Jr. as a middleweight. A guy that could just move, be unorthodox, can punch from either side of the plate, meaning he can give it to you with his right hand, give it to you from his left hand, and could just hit you with footwork and just awkward angles that you have no idea where he's going, where he's been, what he's going to do. He doesn't necessarily have one-punch knockout power. I'm talking about Lomachenko. But he could just methodically and mentally just destroy you. He's made multiple fighters quit, multiple champions quit. Look it up. Against Teofimo Lopez, who was a young monster, a young bull, who was coming to get his. Been calling out Lomachenko for the better part of 2 to 3 years. Him and his dad. Lopez came into this fight knowing that he was going to be the underdog, because going into this fight, Lomachenko was considered either number 1 or number 2 pound for pound going into this fight. After the longest layoff of his career, this is a guy that's had hundreds of amateur fights and only had just over 10 pro fights and was already considered on his way to being a Hall of Fame legend. That's how mesmerizing he was. The footwork, the speed, the angles. Rarely do you see a boxer that can put it all together. And Lomachenko had that. But Lopez, you know what he had? Confidence, heart, size, and punching power. But here's something I want to point out about Lopez. Very similar to Deontay Wilder, Lopez doesn't have just accumulative punching power. Teddy Atlas said it. Punchers are born, not made. Lopez is a puncher. Period. Point blank. And he came in there knowing that he was a puncher. But here's something else. The difference between Lopez and Wilder. Lopez is also a great boxer. He came into the ring confident. He was the naturally bigger man coming into the ring, and he knew it. The naturally stronger man coming into the ring, and he knew it. And he also knew that a guy that has been as active as Lomachenko for as long as Lomachenko has been active, that it was going to be to his disadvantage to be coming back into the ring to fight the second best fighter in his division, arguably, after such a long layoff. Lomachenko came in from the opening bell, took it right to him. Wasn't intimidated, wasn't scared. This is my reign. I'm coming, you have my belts. I'm not taking your belts. You have my belts. Give them to me. We keep talking about the psychology of this game, man. We keep talking about how important it is. It's a psychological game, not just a physical game. Lopez took it to him from the very beginning. Lomachenko was trying to get his feet wet, was trying to get his ring feet wet after such a long layoff. And he was trying to figure out how to deal with a guy that he knew he had power, but he was learning in real time, in ring time, that this man also had boxing skills. He wasn't just going to run in. The moment wasn't too big for Lopez. Teofimo knew what he was going to do. He had a game plan. He wasn't just going to count on his power the way that Deontay did. He understood, oh, I can get you out of there with that power, but I'm not going to chase a knockout. I will take it if it comes, and I will do it within the flow of my game plan, which also involves fundamental boxing. And that's what he did. In my opinion, he won 5 of the first 6 rounds. And Lomachenko, being the champion that he is, being the proud champion that he is, at about the 6th round mark, going into the 7th round, he said, okay, I'm not going to figure him out, and I can't keep running and giving up rounds. I'm going to get in there and fight him. And that's when this fight took off, the second half of that fight, where they were exchanging. Both guys was giving it. Both guys was taking it. Both guys was giving you championship effort, championship skill, championship heart, and throwing championship shots. And in the end, it came down to the 12th round. And Lopez understood. When you're dealing with a popular champion who is also a moneymaker in the sport of boxing, and it's a close fight, we know the history of this game. Lopez knows the history of this game. They're not going to give you that man's belt. Lopez knew. They're not. The judges and everybody else who runs boxing behind the scenes was not going to give him Lomachenko's belt. He knew he had to take it. And take it, he did. Look it up. Lomachenko versus Lopez, 12th round. Just look at the 12th round. You have an entertaining fight. You have a tactical fight from rounds 1 through 6, an entertaining fight, rounds 6 and 12 through 12. And check out the 12th round, the championship rounds, when it really matters. Lopez showed you what the heart he had. I'm going in there and I'm taking this belt. If I get caught, I get caught. I don't care. I didn't go through all this and lobby for this fight for all these years and go through all this training and all this, everything that I went through to get to this point. I didn't do that to play it safe. I did that to take what is mine. And take it, he did. Lopez won that round, won that fight. Congratulations. It's a crop of great fighters in his division. I want to see what he does next. My number 2 fight of 2020 out of my top 4, Lomachenko versus Lopez. All right, so here we go. Dramatic pause. Do all that. All right, got that out the way. My number 1 fight out of my top 4 in the year 2020 goes to Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz. And here's the thing. I have Gervonta as my number 2 pound for pound fighter in the world right now. Just over Lomachenko coming in. Lomachenko has dropped a bit. Lopez, I have to reevaluate him now based on the performance he just gave. Errol Spence maintains that that number 4 spot for me. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Here's the thing about Davis versus Santa Cruz. Davis, much like Wilder, much like Lopez, Davis can get you out of there with one shot. Power. Punchers are born, not made. Power. Davis has got that power. But here's the difference. Davis, much like Lopez, also has boxing skill. We're talking offensive and defensive. He has a game plan. He understands that when it comes down to it, if he has to lean on his power, it'll always be there. But he doesn't depend solely on that power, especially when he knows he's fighting a top-notch opponent. Santa Cruz may not necessarily be a fighter that the casual boxing fan knows, but anybody that's within the sport of boxing that understands boxing and follows this game knew that Santa Cruz was going to give Davis all he could handle. And that's exactly what he did through the first half of the fight. Midway through the fight, Davis got him on them ropes, and he unleashed, in my opinion, the knock. Not only the fight, this is not only the fight of the year, but the knockout of the year. An uppercut, a no count, stop the fight, uppercut that sent Santa Cruz, a guy who had never been previously knocked out, had him out before he even hit the canvas. Sleep. Good night. We talking Nate Robinson, good night. We talking, why are you counting? Get somebody in here. Make sure he okay. Good night. That kind of good night. That's power. Davis showed you exactly why he's the most probably dangerous fighter in the lower weight classes in boxing. And if he's not the most dangerous, he's definitely in the conversation. Gervonta Davis, and here's one thing I want to point out about all of these champions that I just discussed: Davis, Lopez, Spence, even Fury to a degree. They're all young, they're all hungry. They've got long careers ahead of them, and they have to decide. Gervonta Davis has to decide. Mayweather is Floyd Mayweather, the great Floyd Mayweather. No matter how you feel about him, promotes his fights. He's been in his corner, not only literally, but also just bringing him along in this game so that he could try to maximize his potential. A fighter that I always rooted for back in the day, Adrian Broner, was a guy that had immense talent and can also get you out of there. Unfortunately for Broner, he never had the out of ring discipline that he displayed in the ring that made him a four-time champion, and it's finally caught up to him. Gervonta Davis has an opportunity to be the very best version of himself and to be a superstar in this sport. If he can keep his focus, if he can stay in that gym, if he can keep his eyes on the prize, he can be a bona fide superstar in this sport. I'm talking about that casual boxing fans know, casual sports fans know. He has the ability to get there. It's up to him to maintain the focus. In 2021 and beyond, everything is out in front of this young man. And I love what I see from him because he's got all the tools in the toolbox to get it done. All he needs to do is just stay focused. Lopez, stay focused. Errol Spence, you came all the way back from a devastating car accident. Stay focused, man. Tyson Fury, stay focused. We'll see what happens with this fight with Anthony Joshua. We know that in the real world, we're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with a lot of things outside of boxing. We understand that. But we'll see what Bob Arum does. If we can get the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight, we'll see what happens. Deontay Wilder, it ain't nothing but one loss, man. Fork in the road. I talked about George Foreman earlier when I was describing what can happen if you depend on your power and you don't work on the other fundamentals of the game, and it can eventually catch up to you against a top flight opponent. We saw what George Foreman did. He looked in the mirror, became a much more rounded boxer, took a 10-year layoff, mind you, came back and became a boxer puncher and became a champion again. Deontay, you got everything in front of you, in my opinion, to do the exact same thing. It's up to you to make the call, man. Again, so my top 4 fights in 2020. Wilder versus Fury 2, Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia, Vasily Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez, and number 1, Gervonta Davis versus Leo Santa Cruz. All right, so here we go. We're going to talk about entertainment. I brought that up earlier when I was talking about the exhibition that we saw between Mike Tyson and Roy Jones. And I really wanted to take some time to dive into this because leading up to that match, of course, when you are bringing up the names of Roy Jones Jr. and specifically Iron Mike Tyson, those are names, particularly Mike Tyson, those are names that even casual boxing fans know. So when the exhibition was announced, I had people hitting me up, either calling me, texting me, you know what I mean, on social, whatever, talking about, okay, well, who you like in this fight? Or what do you think? Are you excited? And I brought this up. I talked about this on round 1 in season 1 of Champions Material, that I didn't want to watch it, not live at least. And it hurt me because this was a matchup because Tyson was relatively small as far as weight for a heavyweight. So he wasn't, even at his peak, he wasn't that much bigger than Roy Jones when Roy Jones moved up to heavyweight to get his piece of the crown against John Ruiz. So this was a fight maybe 20, even 25 years ago I would have loved to have seen. But the reason why I didn't want to watch it at the time that it aired last year and that it went down last year, because I knew I wasn't watching a true boxing match. And I didn't want the casual fan to say, okay, this is what boxing is about. No, that was entertainment. If Floyd Mayweather comes out here, dominates, and then takes it easy on Paul, if that fight comes off, that's entertainment. That's an exhibition. That's not true boxing. There's a difference. The 4 fights that I just laid out to you, Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, Lomachenko, Lopez, Davis, Cruz, all that is boxing. That is boxing. Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. was entertainment. If Mike Tyson decided to make that a boxing match, Roy Jones Jr. was a guy that always depended on his athleticism and never quite developed the pure fundamentals to know how to respond at a high level if he lost his speed and his reflexes. If Mike Tyson wanted to get him out of there, he likely could have. These guys are both in their 50s. Roy Jones, in my opinion, was my favorite fighter to watch. And at middleweight, particularly at middleweight, let me be clear about this. As a middleweight, was the most talented fighter I've ever seen. Period. Period. It's not even close. So I want to make sure that I'm giving this man his props, but we're talking about a guy that was at middleweight in the early 90s when I was a kid. Y'all, we in 2021 now. That fight just took place a few months ago. Stop it. There's a difference between real fights and exhibitions. So if any more of these, happen down the line, if I hear, okay, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield 3, that's a fight. No, y'all. No, it ain't. It's an exhibition. It's an exhibition. That's what it is. All right. It's entertainment and it's great to watch. And by the way, major credit to Mike Tyson and Roy Jones for getting into phenomenal shape to even make it as entertaining as it was. But again, there's a difference between boxing matches, exhibitions, and entertainment. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. All right, Bud. So if you remember earlier on, I talked about my pound for pound fighters as I was talking about their fights in 2020. I had Errol Spence at number 4. Going into the match, I had Lomachenko at number 3. That's a little different now. I got to update that list. Number 2, I had Gervonta Davis, which that has not changed. That remains the same. My number 1, and I didn't even mention his fight, by the way, his domination that he had a couple of weeks ago, and there's a reason for that. My number 1 pound for pound fighter has been, and this man has occupied this place in my mind ever since he dominated a dangerous Gamboa a few years ago, and that is Terence Bud Crawford. 37-0, 28 knockouts. The latest of those knockouts coming just a few weeks ago against a very competent fighter in Carol Brook. Bud does what he did what he does. He can either switch to southpaw, meaning leading with his right hand, or he can fight orthodox, leading with his left hand. He takes his time. You're not going to speed him up. He can fight going backwards. He can fight going forwards. He can fight from either side of the plate, southpaw or orthodox. He's going to figure you out, do exactly what he wants to do. People say he's a slow starter. No, he's not. He's methodical. He'll win those early rounds to not get behind on the cards. He's just not going to be as aggressive because he's going to figure out exactly what you can do and what you can't do and how he wants to attack. And that's what he did for 3 rounds. At the end of the 4th round, he saw everything he needed to see in Kell Brook, hit him with a shot, drove Kell to the ropes, and finished him off in dominant fashion, like a champion, like the number 1 pound for pound fighter that he is. And you know what he did afterwards? He was campaigning. I want Pacquiao. I want the best in this division. And we're talking about the welterweight division, by the way. I want the best in the division. Give me Pacquiao. Give me Errol Spence, my current number 4 pound for pound fighter. And now that we know that Errol Spence, coming back from his accident, looked like Errol Spence, Terence Crawford said, Joe, give me Errol Spence. I'm a fighter. I've put in the work. I've got the belts. I want the fights that's going to make me a legend. I want the Hearns to my Leonard. I want the Frazier to my Ali. I want the Carmen Basilio or Jake LaMotta to my Ray Robinson. I want the fights that allow me to test myself and see where I stack up against the very best. You know who that sounds like? I'm going to take you all back. And my true boxing heads know exactly who I'm about to bring up. And for, the casual listeners out there checking this episode out, talking about a man by the name of Marvelous Marvin Hagler. I'm concerned. that Terence Bud Crawford is in danger of becoming this generation's marvelous Marvin Hagler. All right. Marvelous Marvin Hagler was a middleweight, a great middleweight that fought in the 1970s, waited years to get his title shot. The first time he was denied, it was called a draw. The second time, he didn't even let it go to the scorecards. He knocked out, I believe it was Vito Infermo to get his championship. Somebody fact check me if I'm wrong, back in 1980. And then he held on to it in dominant fashion for the next 7 years. Only the great Roberto Duran even went the distance with him. Everyone else was knocked out, including the fight that finally gave him recognition 2 years before what would turn out to be his last fight, 12 years after turning professional. And that fight was against Thomas Hitman Hearns. He finally got his due. He finally got the fight that allowed him to show exactly what he could do against the very best competition there was to face. Took the very best of Thomas Hearns, and trust me, taking the very best of Thomas Hearns in that straight right hand was taking the best that you can hope for, that you can even hope for as far as competition in a great fight. Marvin Hagler took the best of Thomas Hearns, came right back, put him down. Hearns was exhausted, broke his right hand, hitting Marvin Hagler, a guy that had an iron chin that was never truly hurt, much less knocked out in his career. But here was the thing. 12 years after turning professional, 5 years after getting a long-awaited and overdue middleweight championship belt, marvelous Marvin Hagler finally got the recognition that he deserved against a top opponent. The big fight against a big opponent to show what he could do, to put him on a level that led to his last two fights against John the Beast Mugabe and most famously Sugar Ray Leonard, the Sugar Man. Terence Bud Crawford, he's 37-0. He has been either number one or number two pound for pound for the better part of the last 5 to 6 years, as Floyd Mayweather transitioned into becoming a promoter and into his other businesses. As Manny Pacquiao has finally slowed down from years of being at the top level as a professional. Still dangerous, but not what he was 10 years ago. We all know that. We've seen it. Terence Bud Crawford has been number one, in my opinion, pound for pound for the better part of the last 5 years, maybe even 6. He still does not have the signature fight, the signature opportunity against a great opponent to give him a mainstream appeal that he deserves. And there's several reasons for that. Number one, he's too good. He's too good and he's too dangerous. He can hurt you. He can get you out of there. And he's stuck between the rock and the hard place. The irony of it is he's so good that the top fighters have been avoiding him. And I love this guy. And again, I admire his perseverance coming back from a car crash. Among them, Errol Spence. Boxing promoters can get in the way of making top fights when the fighters ultimately want that to happen. It's just a fact. When the fighters want the fights ultimately happen. You get the money right, you make it happen. Terence Bud Crawford is still in his prime. He has been so good, but here's the thing. He's been so good for so long, but what he doesn't have is the mainstream appeal to have his fights be featured as pay-per-view fights that the average boxing fan, me, you got my money. I know what I've seen for the better part of the last decade plus. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the casual boxing fan. Are they going to pay $50, $60, $70 to watch a Terence Bud Crawford fight? Not at the level that will make him an opponent that's attractive enough for another top flight opponent to get in the ring with him. Because here's the deal. If you're another top flight opponent and you've been working your ass off to get to the top, to get the kind of paydays that allow you to get about this game with your faculties intact and with your finances intact, what you don't want to do is get in the ring with a guy that it's not that you think that you will lose to him, but special all-time fighters like Terence Bud Crawford are guys that other top flight fighters know. It's not that I'm afraid that I will lose, but I know that I can. So is it financially worth the risk of getting in the ring with this man? Marvin Hagler dealt with this for years and years and years. Thomas Hearns only fought him when Thomas Hearns was on the comeback trail to try to get to the top after his defeat by Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard fought Marvelous Marvin Hagler only when Marvelous Marvin Hagler finally, after the Hearns fight, and then after the bruising fight that he had against John the Beast Mugabe, finally showed signs of slowing down just a little bit. Enough that Ray Leonard knew if I can just box him and keep on my toes, I can beat him by decision. I'm not going to stand and slug with him. I know better than that. But he slowed down. Marvelous Marvin Hagler has slowed down just enough to convince Sugar Ray Leonard that if I just simply box him, I'll beat him. And that's what happened. Terence Crawford is not at that point, y'all. Terence Crawford is still at his absolute peak. Coming off of the longest layoff that he's had in his career, he did the opposite of what we saw from Lomachenko. He picked up right where he left off. Methodical, controlling the ring, controlling the tempo, controlling the action, deciding what was going to happen when it was going to happen. He got Kell Brook out of there. And then he immediately said, look, I want mine. I want my recognition. I want the top fights. Spence, where you at? Pacquiao, where you at? Any top level welterweight, where you at? Haven't heard nothing yet. I personally haven't heard nothing yet. And trust me, people I notice in this game, they ain't heard nothing yet. All the people I follow on social, all the people that are in the know, they ain't heard nothing yet. Terence Bud Crawford is in a weird position. He's in a very difficult position where he's going to have to continue to take fights against quality opponents, but not opponents that are going to ultimately test him at the highest level. He may have to follow the same path that Marvelous Marvin Hagler did. That he won't get the real fights that he deserves against the top opponents, the top name opponents that will put asses in the seats, and nowadays in 2021, that will get the buys, the pay-per-view buys on streaming sites to make it attractive for him and for the opponent until he slows down. And it's a damn shame. That has been an issue that has plagued boxing from the very beginning. That at times we don't get the matchups. I just talked about these two a while ago. Wouldn't it have been great to have seen Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather 5-10 years before we saw it? Remember how long we had to wait on that? And although we got it, it wasn't what we knew it could have been if it happened at the right time. Hell, the entertainment that was Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones. What kind of real fight would that have been if we would have got it at the right time? Timing is everything in this game, y'all. Come on now. Come on, Errol Spence. Come on, Manny Pacquiao. Whoever else. Hell, Lopez, get up there in that division. Give this man the fight that he needs. Get this man the fight that he deserves. And I'm saying deserves. I'm not one. I'm sitting on the sidelines. I'm just a boxing guy. I'm just a boxing fan more than anything else. Bud Crawford deserves this. He deserves the payday, but most importantly, he deserves the recognition. He deserves the fights that you can talk about years after he retired. That's what separates the great fighters, the Alis, the Ray Leonard. That's what allowed, one of the many things that allowed Ray Robinson to be what he always will be, the greatest fighter pound for pound to ever live. The great opponents that the casual fans knew, the fights that we still talk about decades later, years later. Bud doesn't have that yet, and it's not his fault at all. He needs the right dance partners in the ring, man, to bring the best out of him and to make him, to stamp his place in boxing history. He's already a Hall of Famer, period. If Bud Crawford just decided to hang up the gloves tomorrow, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. We all know it. I just do not want this man to retire without having the great fights and the great matchups that allows us, not within the boxing community, but the casual fan to appreciate him for how great he is. Terence Crawford, my number one pound for pound fighter, We are just starting this year, 2021. I hope this man gets the matchup and the matchups in the future that he deserves because he's truly special. One of the best to ever do it. Point blank, period. All right. Now, there it is. This is the first episode of 2021, the first episode of season two. I appreciate everybody out there for tuning in. As always, you can find Champions Material on Facebook, IG, Twitter, and our YouTube channel. Now, I talked about this at the top of the show, or at least I hinted at it. Now, we got a special announcement. I'm happy to debut for season two and beyond the official Champions Material Discord channel. All right, now back in season one, I talked about how important the listeners' feedback was to this show. And one thing I heard, and I heard it often, was, how nice it would be if we had a Champions, if Champions Material, how nice it would be for Champions Material to have a community type of setting so that you all will be able to interact with me beyond just like the emails or for, some of y'all who know me directly. But I'm talking about for those who taking the time to tune in to the show but don't know me directly. How nice it would be for us to be able to interact, with each other. You all interact amongst yourselves as well. Just to have a community. We could talk about, show topics, life topics. We could bring show ideas, out there, just whatever was on your mind. So for those who are already familiar with Discord, everything I'm about to say and lay out will make sense for those who are already familiar with Discord. But for those who aren't familiar, I'm going to walk you through it real quick. It's safe and it's simple. To join Discord and ultimately join the Champions Material channel and our community, all you got to do is either download the app to your phone. We talking Android or Apple, don't matter. Laptop, anywhere Apple apps are found. Or you just pull it up on your web browser. We talking Firefox, Chrome, whatever. You create a free, keyword, free account using your email. And at that point, you'll get a username. Once you get the username, you shoot that over to me at champions.materialsv@gmail.com. Again, it's champions.materialsv@gmail.com. Then I, Shawn Vaughn, by the way, or Shawn V on Discord, will send you a friend request. You accept that, and then I'll send you the link to the channel. And after I do that, you join in the zone. And you're only going to have to do this one time. This is not going to be like an every time deal. Just do it one time, and that's it. Again, it's free. Discord is free. And for many reasons, it's important for me to get to know you guys as individuals, what you all are about beyond just taking the time to tune in to the show. Now, for those who are already on Discord, you're familiar with everything I just laid out. So I am Shawn V, number 6172. Again, Shawn V, number 6172. And my profile pic is the Joker, my favorite DC character. Look for me, man, for real. It's going back and looking over everything and all the feedback from season one and looking over, all the places where people, took the time to tune in. We're talking not just the cities, but the states and the countries. It was really humbling. And the one thing that I wish I had the ability to do was to know, you all, because you're taking the time to tune in and support Champions Material. We got some big things coming up here in season two. Some giveaways coming up in season two. And hopefully we're going to have a listener actually come on to the show. Really looking forward to that idea. And that's the reason why I want to get to know you all and, see what your program is and see, get some ideas, some show ideas. We're going to be shaking things up, man. A lot of things were learned on season one that I want to go ahead and advance in season two. And I know that the Champions Material Discord channel will take this season and this show to the next level. So I really, I appreciate you all support. Just take that extra step for me, man. Let's go ahead and join that Discord. Let's make this a true community for Champions Material, but just for all of us. I talked about this in season one. At the very first episode, I'll never forget. Me, we. It's the old Muhammad Ali quote. Me, we. That's Champions Material. So I want to thank y'all in advance. And let's get this. Let's do this, man. Let's get this thing cracking for real. Tap in. Let's make it work. All right. So as I close this episode out, you know what I'm about to say. For all my people that have supported me throughout season one, And for all the new listeners, you're going to get used to this. Whoever you want to be and whatever you want to be, always be the champion of it. That's champions material. It's a new year. We're done with 2020. Thank God we're done with 2020. Ugh, couldn't have ended fast enough. Let's make the best of 2021, y'all. Let's turn the page. Let's be the best of ourselves. That's what champions material is all about. Getting off of your stuck, whatever your stuck is, whatever it's if it's your current situation, if it's mental, physical, financial, it's all about getting off of that stuck and making the best of yourself and the best of the circumstances around you. All right. Much love to y'all for real, man. Appreciate the support. Be safe. We'll be back sooner than later with our next episode. But for now, we're done.